Does your business provide a quality service or product? If the answer is yes, then there is a combination of tactics that can be customized to fit your unique business that makes your business super profitable, creates wealth, and makes a difference in the process. I know this because I've built a few tiny businesses to more than $70 million. You're listening to the Entrepreneurs Radio Show. Conversations with self-made millionaires and high-level entrepreneurs that will grow your business. Hey, it's Travis Lane Jenkins. Welcome to episode 107 of the Entrepreneurs Radio Show, a production of RockstarEntrepreneurNetwork.com, where each and every week I connect you with rockstar entrepreneurs that explain their journey to success and what's been the key principles to finding a high level of success as an entrepreneur, so that you can see that successful entrepreneurs are really just everyday people that stayed committed to taking constant, focused action each and every day. Now, today I'm going to connect you or introduce you to Chris Taylor. Now, before we get started, I want to say thank you to Larry C82 from Canada for the 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Larry wrote as a headline your handbook for business strategy. Larry went on to write a very detailed review. Larry, I want to tell you, I personally really appreciate you taking the time and writing the review, and I love the feedback, so thank you very much. Now, just in case you don't know, writing a review helps us reach more entrepreneurs just like yourself, and the reason for that is iTunes and Stitcher believes that if you're leaving comments, then the show must be valuable, and therefore they'll serve it to more of their audience. So if you have time and you do find value in the show, I'd really appreciate it if you'd go in and leave us a quick review and let me know how we're doing. And then, of course, I'll recognize you on air and say thank you. One last thing, before we get started, I want to remind you also that there are 3 ways you can take these interviews with you on the go: through iTunes, Android, or Stitcher. Just go to RockstarEntrepreneurNetwork.com and click on right there on the menu bar. You can either click on iTunes, Android, or Stitcher on the menu bar, and it will take you directly to the podcast. That way you don't have to try and go through a search function for it. And then you can also subscribe to the show there if that's what you want to do. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get down to business. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Travis. I'm excited to be here.
You bet. Hey, do you mind sharing the backstory? You've got kind of an interesting backstory of how you got started and what brought you to where you're at today. Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. As my dad has a habit of saying, it's a 3-beer story, Travis, if I tell the whole thing, but I'll give you the highlights. I started my career in sales. When I was in university, I worked for a direct sales company and involved in business to consumer, B2C sales, and I loved it. I did well at it, and as a result of that, I was promoted successively and ultimately given an opportunity to run my own franchise for the company, which I did. And really, we just hit the ground running and kicked butt for the first sort of 12, 14 months, I'd say. One of the top producing on an individual level, one of the top producing branches in the country, or in North America rather, out of about 1,000 branches. And that success went straight to my head. I was 22 years old, and ego took over, and all the things that I've been doing right, I stopped doing because I figured like I deserved it now because, at 23, I was entitled to all of this success, right?
Right.
And consequently, of course, the whole thing fell apart. So I started reading originally self-help books, personal development books, to try to figure out what had happened. And I moved on to business books shortly after that because I found that I had an interest in sort of business strategy and particularly around leadership and relationship building in the workplace. And I was starting to see, I'd taken a job in corporate marketing, and went from working with 19-year-olds to working with 39-year-olds and 49-year-olds and 59-year-olds. And I started seeing that a lot of the challenges that I'd seen from collaboration and leadership and communication and even self-management pieces that had existed for the 19-year-olds that I'd sort of assumed were because they were kids, right? Were actually in some cases even worse as people got later into their careers because they had that many more things to deal with on their plate. And so I became fascinated with this idea of, what it means to develop those soft skills that were going from a nice to have to being really essential for professional success in the 21st century. So I started Actionable Books as sort of a passion project. It was a hobby where I was consuming ideas from top business books and then spitting them out into 2-page summaries where the idea was really around not just learning those ideas, but how to best apply them in a busy work world. And, it was entirely a project for myself. It wasn't meant to be a business, but it started growing at a fairly decent clip and fairly steadily. And so I ended up quitting my full-time job in 2009 and working on Actionable ever since. And really what we've worked to become now is an online resource center for busy professionals who believe in the importance of top business books and leading-edge business thinking and how to apply that in a way that advances both the individual and the team. So how's that?
Very cool. That was kind of half a beer explanation.
That's right. If you're keeping track at home, that's right. Exactly.
Assuming I'm drinking a beer right now.
Of course.
So
we have to make that assumption.
Right. So there's a couple of things here. So B2C, you started out in B2C, business to consumer. And yep. So, I love that element. I come from that place also. And I think it's a really fast way to develop a set of skills because you can instantly see what's working and what isn't and dial that in right on the spot, move on. It could be door-to-door sales, and you dial it in until you really refine it into a process. So that's hyper learning. And then one of the things you talked about is developing soft skills. Explain for everybody what soft skills are.
Sure. So if you are, a carpenter, say, the hard skills are the trades of your craft. So whatever business you're in, probably there are technical skills that need to be learned in order to do your job properly. Right. The soft skills are the skills that aren't necessarily defined on paper as being necessary for the job, but when you learn them and develop them, you become a lot more effective in the role that you're in.
Right.
And what I found, Travis, was, in 2009, I started interviewing the authors of some of these books. So I got a chance to sit down with Seth Godin and Dan Pink and Patrick Lencioni and Simon Sinek and a bunch of other people, and it was really interesting the conversations that we were having because these people are all sort of thought leaders in their space, but that space is very broad. Some are marketing, some are leadership, some are sales, and on and on. But what was really fascinating to me and what's sort of driven the last 5 years of my business and my life is they were all talking about the same thing. Whether you were focused on marketing or leadership or sales or whatever, they were talking about these skills, these soft skills that had gone from a nice to have in sort of the 20th century, if you want to sort of broad strokes. And they were always good, but they were sort of unnecessary to really they've become essential for both individuals and businesses to succeed in the 21st century. And specifically, they really circle around collaboration and communication skills, the ability to speak in a language that resonates with your intended audience, whether that intended audience is your child or your client or your boss.
Right. I've always viewed soft skills as communication and sales. And so yep. For some people, it comes natural. And now I made this mistake for several years, and I'm really curious if you made the same mistake also. So for me, communication and sales came very naturally to me, and I really didn't give it much thought, right? And so I would go out and sell things. In my first business, I would sell things that I believed in. I wouldn't sell anything, obviously, that I didn't believe in. And I was just annihilating them, industry standards. I would sell triple that. And to me, my first reasoning was I thought, well, most people are just lazy. They're not out there driving as hard as I am. And then, and this is very naive, this is a young me, And I went through a lot of the same things that you did at 22, 23, 25, 26, where I thought, well, are you stupid? Come on, this is simple stuff. I'm not creating any special magic here. And later on, I come to realize that I possessed naturally a skill set of those soft skills of sales and communication, and it wasn't easy for everybody else. Did you have that same path, or did you have to, or were you always aware that you had a skill that wasn't natural?
No, I would say, Travis, young you and young me would have been reading from the same playbook. We probably would have been competing on everything too, but
right.
We were the same mindset there. It took me a while. I think the real turning point for me was we launched a licensing program with Actionable about 4 years ago, where high-functioning coaches and consultants and facilitators could license our program and use it in their own practice. And it was really interesting to me because we have a filtering criteria, and so we were truly getting some of the brightest, most intellectually stimulating, engaging people that I'd ever worked with being a part of this group. And it was amazing to me because I had that assumption, even 4 years ago that, well, they're talented, they're smart people, so they must be able to sell. There was just that correlation in my head where if there was someone that I wanted to hang out with, then they would be able to sell. And, as I've learned, it's, I think to your point, there's an interesting nurture and nature conversation there because I do believe that certain aspects of it can be taught. And I also do believe that there are some people who are just inherently better salespeople than the average person.
Right. I was just a natural stage 3 of competence. I knew how to do something. I just didn't know how to teach it. And until I grew as a individual and a businessman and moved to stage 4 of competence, which means I knew how to do it and I knew how to teach it, I suddenly become aware that what was easy to me isn't necessarily easy to everybody else. And so that was kind of a turning point for me. Now I'm curious with your actionable books, how do you monetize that?
That's a great question. So, as I said, originally there was no monetization strategy because it was strictly, a hobby. What was interesting was it happened somewhat organically. Early on, back probably early 2010, I had a number of friends of mine who were still leading sales teams within the company that I'd come from previously. And they knew that I had done something to retain and develop my people. Because that was the one thing that we were really good at. We hung on to our people longer than most other branches did. And so they were asking for insight, tips, tools. And the one thing that I could sort of trace it back to more than anything else was these hour-long learning sessions where I would gather my top, 10, 12 sales reps on a weekly basis, and we would get together sort of off hours, if you will, and we would talk not about product or promotion or contests or anything. We would talk about them and their personal and professional development. And so I took the format that I developed for that program and started to layer in some of these ideas from the books that I was reading. So, we'd have, 7 Habits where it would be the sort of 4 levels of listening. I would, teach them the 4 levels of listening, and then I would create exercises around how they could practice it with their teams. And that became a subscription model where we called the program Actionable Workshops. And it's these hour-long learning modules that team leaders can access to run with their staff. And that was the very beginning of it. Originally, it was just a pile of PDFs behind a paywall. But after and during those interview conversations where I started to get some clarity around what these soft skills were that were most essential, we built a model around it that we call the salaried entrepreneur. And we started to really promote and structure. I say we, it was just me back then, but promote and structure the workshops as an offering that we would scale up. And so now, Actionable Workshops generates probably about 70% of our revenue on an annual basis. The licensing program for consultants that are leveraging those modules to use with their clients, they have a slightly different stream, and they become a revenue stream as well as a marketing engine. And then, little stuff here or there. We just launched a business builder boot camp for consultants specifically who are looking to improve sales and marketing. And so we'll do, projects like that. But our main bread and butter is workshops.
Well, there's just a whole lot of different opportunities for monetization with this business, right?
Yeah, definitely.
One of the interesting things with your story trajectory is something very similar to what I've done. And I like to pay attention to how people are naturally, you said nurture versus nature. We all come out of the womb leaning one way or the other. I think you're just naturally strong one way. And then you, through a series of events in your life, you decide to develop the weakest side. And I have found that traditionally you become more financially successful when you develop both sides. Now, that's a dangerous statement because you could get lost spending 20 years developing all your weaknesses, which is not necessarily a wise move.
Yeah.
So I don't want that statement to be taken the wrong way. But, I'm really interested in how people come out and how they deal with things naturally. You and I are very similar because I've had a history of having people work for me 15, 20 years. And it is because I took an interest in them and we taught them. At the time, I didn't realize it, but I implemented an element of gamification into the process. And so we would play around with it. And while I taught them these classes, we'd have fun. It benefited the company. We measured performance, and then we reported performance on the board. And then, of course, due to everybody's ranking being listed on the board, nobody wanted to be last, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Which can have a negative connotation, but everybody stayed invested and they had a good time. And so I really love that element of what you did there. Now, with the actionable books, I like the value of that is brilliant also because I'm a book junkie and I can consume large amounts of books. And sometimes I need to just slow down and implement what's in the book or spend more time thinking about it, applying those strategies, going deeper, because a lot of these strategies can go a mile deep. And that sounds to me that's kind of what you're doing with the actionable books.
Yeah, whether it's through the actual summaries on the site, which I've long since stopped doing the weekly summary, but we've got there's about 115 volunteers now that actually produce those summaries. So we have 20 new summaries a week going live on the site, a month going live on the site, and then a new workshop typically once a month. My biggest cautionary note to people when they're going in is actually exactly to that point where we're covering 20 books a month on the site. Don't try to read all the summaries, or if you are reading all the summaries, don't try to implement everything from all those summaries, and it becomes a flavor of the month sort of thing, right? What I believe, and Chris Brogan wrote a post about this. I think it was just January of this year or maybe last year, around really going on a reading diet of choosing a couple books, 2 or 3 books, even just for the year. Which for people that read a lot, like, what? I couldn't possibly slow down. But it's really about taking everything you can from that book to actually do something with it and put something into practice. Because we've got more information coming at us that we can possibly consume, and so it really becomes a matter of what are you doing with all that information. And in my mind, it's better to read one book slowly and apply something from it than it is to read 5 books in the same amount of time just for the sake of collecting more information.
Right. Yeah, I used to go through 4 books a month, and I had to dial that back to 1 book a month. Are you on a diet of 1 to 2 books a year?
No, well, now I'm down to probably 1 a month. I still do the author interviews about once a month, and so I'm usually reading their book before the session. But yeah, I'm trying to scale back because I used to be 4 a month as well, and had to scale back for sure.
Right. So what do you feel like are the key elements that most business owners, entrepreneurs are missing in growing a business? Looking back in your journey so far, what was those turning points, and what are the most important things that you've gleaned from your journey so far?
That's a great question, Travis. I appreciate it. I think one of the biggest things, particularly in the last year and a half or so with the business, was a quote that I read a couple of years ago from Eric Ries in the Lean Startup. But it was this idea that just because something can be built doesn't mean it should be built. And particularly playing in the web space as I do, I mean, it's so easy to have an idea, send an email to my lead developer and say, hey, let's do this. And, spend a lot of time, money, and energy developing things based on a whim rather than actually, being intelligent about, where's the economic viable model on this and how do I test the theory and, what's the minimum number of people I need to involve in it to do that test rather than constantly taking my team after the new shiny object that's entered my head, right? So I think that's been one of the big learnings for me in the last little while. And the other one that I'm still continuing to learn is really, I mean, your clients will tell you what they want to spend money on. And if you just listen to them, and I'm telling myself this, not preaching to anyone other than me. If you just listen to the people that are in your community, the people that love what you do, and ask them what they're looking for, it may be a variation of that, or it may give you insight into what they're not asking for. But I don't think that, particularly myself and the other business owners that I hang out with, I don't think we ask enough from our audiences as to what exactly they're looking for. I don't think we listen as well as we could.
Oh, I completely agree with you. So how do you do that? Take me down a path where, what are you uncovering that helps you do a better job of that?
Sure. So, some of the basic stuff right off the top is, I'm personally monitoring again all of our social media activity and comments on different sections of the website, which, we've got a great team that manages that, but I'm watching it now to see what people are saying. I've also gotten the habit of reaching out to a small number, usually 2 or 3 people a week that have signed up for our just regular mailing list, newsletter list. Mm-hmm. Just to connect and just to ask, who they are and where they come from and what they're about. And I'm not trying to sell them anything yet. I might down the road, but for now, it's really about just getting to know them and who they are and what they're about. And it's not it could be a PR stunt, but it's something that's really important, I think, to hear from people before, they're in that buying cycle to actually understand who they are and what they do. The other thing that I try to do as much as I can is see what, not what the competition's doing necessarily, because I actually don't pay a ton of time with that, but to see who's attracted to the competition and what attracted them there. And that can be a really interesting conversation as well. Just, again, it's not even a matter of trying to win that business. It's just, someone spent money on something that's in the space of what we do. How do we, learn from that? Right. I think, 2 of the big personality traits, Travis, that have been constantly in the back of my head for the last probably year and a half is this idea of curiosity. If you're in a place of curiosity and working to just learn about whatever it is from whomever you're talking to, genuinely, there's no real room for judgment, is what I'm experiencing. And so because judgment, this is going to close doors, or it's going to shut it off, and they're wrong and I'm right, but instead, if you can go in from a place of curiosity into those conversations, it can have a really interesting impact. And the other one is this idea of awesome. Thank you. Of humility, right? Basically, taking the approach that I don't know what I don't know. And there's more information out there, that there's someone smarter in every area, no matter what it is or how close it is to my core, work, that if I can go with that humility with, again, sort of balancing that curiosity or working with it to learn from, everybody out there's got someone to teach you if you're listening carefully enough, right?
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with you. By the way, Chris is over in Spain, so there's a little bit of a delay to our, conversations back and forth with each other. So we're not intentionally stepping on each other. Hey, Chris, do you have any tools that you use to do some of this intelligence or research, or do you launch surveys or anything that helps you get a kind of a non-biased perspective of what's going on and what they want?
We do, yeah, in a couple places. With our consultant network, so with our licensees, we do a monthly survey. It's typically 1 or 2 questions, just getting a finger on the pulse as regards to how things are going for them. They're also in touch with as many clients, if not more so, than we are corporately, and so they have great insight. So we'll do that, and it's looking to your channel partners for what they're hearing from the end consumer, if depending on how companies are set up. So we do that. From a really sort of granular standpoint, I use a tool called Signals. which is created by HubSpot, and it's a great little plugin for about $10 a month, I think, where I can actually see who's opening and clicking on the emails that I send out from my personal inbox. And so I use that for data collection on what's been interesting to people. If I do reach out, and same as I'm sure you do, and lots of people do, you send 100 emails a day or more, being able to see what's attractive to people. Even playing with my signature and my email and changing that up to see what, sort of tagline I can put on there that draws attention from people. It's really passive data collection, and it's really interesting to me to see what resonates with whom.
So how are you able to measure, your signature? How are you able to get data so that you can tell whether one signature is more effective than the other? Maybe by the clicks.
So with that tools, by signals. It's the signals clicks, and so it's I just track it by that.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. I interviewed one of the top guys over there, so I should know some of this. But okay, interesting. You've really piqued my interest. I'm not familiar with Signal, so I'm going to have to check that out. So you said ask your channel providers. Can you go a little deeper and tell me what you're talking about there?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in our case, and everyone's different, but in our case, our the consultants in our licensing program are really the ones who interact with most clients, particularly face-to-face, on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we may have the volume of eyeballs by comparison, but they're the ones who are really talking to clients and getting insight. And so, I found it's interesting. There's two components to it. Asking those questions in the monthly survey collects immediate feedback, which is good, but it can also prompt them to start asking some of those questions from their clients. If they don't, if they look at that question and go, gosh, I have no idea what people's, number one feature is or whatever. So maybe I should start asking that from the people that I'm talking to. So we get a sort of a linear flow of information from corporate to consultants to clients and back up again. So that's what I was referring to.
Oh, okay. Well, so one of the things you talked about being, I've taken a lot of notes here, and I'm scanning back over some of the notes that I took. And you said be curious without making a judgment, or no, what was the words that you use?
Yeah, it was basically along those lines. I mean, what I've experienced is that when you are sort of putting yourself in a state of curiosity, which I can elaborate on in a second, it doesn't leave a lot of room for you to be in a position of judgment.
Judgment, yeah.
And judgment, yeah.
Okay, so by the way, I completely agree with you on that. And that happens more than I think most people realize or most people ever talk about. So I'd love for you to go deeper on that. And to be completely honest, Chris, sometimes I catch myself starting to drift into judgment. And for the simple fact that I realize that it's a problem, I hold myself accountable and say, now, wait a minute. What are you doing? Why are you judging here? Listen to the whole thing and pay attention and try to draw. So it really struck a chord with me. So I'd love for you to go deeper with me on that.
Absolutely. And Travis, I don't think you'd be human if you didn't slip into that judgment phase. I think we all do, and I'm certainly guilty of it. I think, it's particularly if we're involved in repetitive tasks or what appears to be a repetitive task. So, for example, we have, probably about 25 or 30 people a week sign up for free access to Actionable Workshops, and it's a trial. And so I reach out to those people, all of them, and, I get replies from some of them, and then we connect for a phone call. So as you can imagine, there's a number of calls happening each week, and they all start pretty much the same way. And so it's very easy on the, 14th call that week or 7th call that day to be, okay, here's another one. When they start down a certain path and the last 3 that started that way didn't buy or whatever, I think particularly when we're in that sort of sales mode, it's almost a defense mechanism, right? To slip into judgment and just think, well, they don't get it. They just don't get it. And so if we can get out of that headspace, or for myself, getting out of that headspace to say, there's a living, breathing person on the other end of this phone or Skype who, has taken some time, even if it's only 10 minutes, taken some time out of their for sure busy day, because we're all busy, right? If you have a pulse in a job, you're busy. And they've taken time to connect with me. And so I'm just going to take a minute here to really try to understand what it is that brought them here and get out of the position of trying to, talk them into buying it or turning them down a path of seeing the benefits of the program, any of that. Just getting into the position of, what are you doing here? How can I help? What drew you in? What keeps you up at night? Just really getting that understanding. And I think, we talked about sales at the beginning, all of this for anybody who's seasoned in sales, I was going, yeah, that's how you sell stuff. And it's true, right? I mean, this is where successful sales come from, is when we come at it from this place of curiosity. But I've really, tried to put those deliberate breaks in place, as it sounds like you have, where as soon as I start thinking I know how their sentence is going to end or how the conversation is going to end, or really start, slipping into the future as opposed to in the moment, try to stop that and come back to the real words that they're saying. And it makes a big difference. I know for me, and maybe this is helpful, I mean, I've got 3 monitors up right now, right? And I literally have to put blinders on. I put my hand to the side of my head to make sure that I'm not seeing the new things popping up on screen and Twitter feeds and all that. I think we have too many things in front of us at any given time, particularly when we're in conversations like that where we want to stay curious. When we have distractions, it's easy to judge and move on. When we're focused on that isolated incident, I think it allows us to stay curious.
Yeah, well said. So the mistake I made early on that I think is worth pointing out, and you're basically describing it here. So early on, I wanted to sell. When I was 22, 25, 26, I wanted to sell everybody all of my stuff all the time, no matter what, right? Yeah. And I've, with age and wisdom and failure and all the other things, I've come to realize that it's not always a good fit for them. And so being curious. So for me, I'm naturally I was born curious. Which has caused me a lot of problems, but also made me successful. and that's what has helped me become very good at helping other businesses, is because I focus on asking questions, which is that curiosity that you're talking about. And so, when and even as we talk, studying and learning is never over, and I'm pretty qualified in a lot of these things, but I love to see how other people think, and digging deeper and adding some of your learnings to my skill set is fascinating. And the only way you can do that is by exactly what you said, staying completely present with what's going on, asking questions. And I've always viewed communication as kind of throwing a ball, right? And so I throw you a ball, you throw it back. And, I can't catch that ball if I'm not paying attention. And I've done interviews and I've spoke with people that aren't paying attention, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell when that's going on. So I think that's a brilliantly authentic way to build a relationship with someone. And also, when you're in sales, those questions should allow you to decide whether you should offer what you have to that person or you shouldn't, because everybody's not an exact fit. And you'll cause yourself more problems by bringing people that are not a good fit into your business and still trying to provide them a service, right?
And that's on all levels, right, Travis? I mean, that's the other, sort of big learning that I've had in the last little bit is that, whether it's an employee, a channel partner or any other type of partner or a client, it's just not worth it. I mean, the cash may seem great, particularly if you're in a tight spot, but it ends up costing you 10 times what you make off of it when you don't align with those people that really get what you do and are speaking the same language. I think that's the great joy of being an entrepreneur, is that, we struggle through a lot, right, at various times, and we get to enjoy those highs as well. Biggest thing for me is you get to choose who you work with on all levels, right? And that's awesome. I can't think of anything better than getting to decide who you hang out with all day.
Oh, I completely agree. So let me ask you, what do you think those alignments should be? Now, this is a really broad question, but when you're doing business with someone, what do you think that alignments should be so that there's a good, healthy relationship?
Great question. I think there's two parts to it. On a sort of more softer woo-woo level, I think there's a values alignment. So, we're going to play this game together. How are we going to play, and what do we allow as fair rules and what's not fair rules? And I think, that piece of it needs to feel good on both sides. So this is the soft part, right? It's got to feel good, that the way in which we're going to go about achieving whatever it is that we're going to achieve, we all need to feel that that's the right way to do it. But the other piece to it that I think so many, particularly when we're trying to sell a client, particularly on a newer product, is that end goal alignment. Do we both have the same crystal clear definition of what we're working to achieve? And, coming back, I realize we're focusing a lot on sales here, but that's part of the nature of being an entrepreneur, right? You spend a lot of time in sales.
Right.
The focus, I think, when it's short term, when the focus is on make the sale, that's not the same goal as the client ever, right? Because their goal is not to buy from you. Their goal is to achieve some end with that, whatever they bought from you. And so we need to, before the contract's signed, before checks are cashed, we need to have a clear alignment around what it is that we're working towards, what's the intended outcome, not the features and benefits of what the tool is going to do, where so many of us can get caught up in the own shininess of our offering, but really, what are they expecting to get out of it? And I don't think you can have too clear or too many conversations around that during the sales process. And the end result, of course, is that they start to picture what it's going to look like, and they get really excited about that. If there is alignment, then you've led to a much easier sale. So I think it's a double win on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a famous quote that, and I'm sure I'm probably going to murder it, but it says, the most common misunderstanding in a communication is that it has just occurred. And so many people...
You're going to have to explain that one for me.
Yeah, so many people think, and I first discovered this when I had a meeting, and I had 50 people in the meeting, and I spoke as clearly as I thought I could possibly speak. And now this is somebody that feels like I feel like I'm a good communicator. I'm good at sales, all these other things. And I had 5 different versions of what people thought I said in that meeting. And it was that awakening that I realized, depending on your perspective, who you are and how you listen, you pick up certain parts of that message. And so it's very common for people to feel like communication has just happened when it really has not. And so
I got it.
When you said, do we have the same vision of the outcome? That's exactly it. That makes so much sense. When we're successful, this is what success is going to look like, right? And so many people miss that because they go along delivering this product or service thinking that they're delivering an absolute incredible experience. And from the client's perspective, it's not what they expected. So therefore, they're not as enamored with the result as the person delivering it feels like they should be, right?
Sure. Absolutely. And I think, when we're dealing with the client, again, particularly if we're in the early stages of running the business or if we're in a tight cash spot, I think there's a certain fear that can hold us back from having that conversation because, there's this voice in the back of our head saying that, well, but maybe if you clarify that outcome, their desired outcome's not going to be the same as what you can provide, and maybe it's not going to happen. And I think we need to lean into that fear. I mean, it's, and again, I'm saying it, I'm not saying it's easy to do. But I think, coming back to the point from earlier that it's a lot cheaper to walk away from it and lose that short-term cash than it is to engage in it and realize 3/4 of the way through the process that you are totally misaligned as far as what you wanted out of the program.
Right. Completely agree. I'm blown away. I got to tell you that you're way ahead of you're fairly young, 30 years old, right? Right around that range?
32 now. 32, yeah.
So, you're way ahead of me where I was at 32. I'm 48. And so, man, I'm thoroughly impressed with the knowledge and insight and perspective that you've developed in being an entrepreneur. Geez, man, we need a million more just like you. So, congratulations on that, Chris.
Well, that's very kind. I appreciate it. I can take very little credit for it. I mean, I've consumed probably, like yourself, Travis. I mean, I probably consumed 300 or 400, business books, and not just consumed them, but actually taken something from them to really disseminate it, take it out, look it over, and say, how do I apply this? And I think, anytime that we can build any of that reflection time into our lives, where we're all way too busy, we've got too much going on, we can't possibly do everything that needs to be done in the days we have, and so that sort of quadrant 2, to borrow from Covey, sort of important but not urgent task list never seems to get addressed. And I think the best thing we can do to improve our own level of sort of insight and whatever you want to call it, business acumen, is to build in and hold to those appointments of regular reflection on what you've learned and what you didn't, and whether you're learning the lesson for the 4th time, maybe it's time to actually learn it. I think those reflection times are important.
Right. I think that the important takeaway, because I believe there's a misbelief with a lot of people that when I reach this certain level, I'll no longer need to put so much effort in learning, and which is wrong. The learning piece never, ever stops. So the best thing to do, if you're not already there, to everybody that's listening, is learn to like it. Right?
Yep.
So,
and I think find your way of embracing it, right? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about today's age. I mean, if you're not a reader, then start listening to audiobooks. And if you're not an audiobook person, then go find some video footage of TED Talks. I think there's so many different, start going to more conferences, set aside a budget to go out and experience courses. I think there's so many ways in which we can engage with learning now that it doesn't have to be something that we don't enjoy. You can find a method or a mode that works for you.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Sorry to cut you off.
No worries. I agree with you. I consume a lot of my books via audio. So I go through Audible, and I just have credits that show up every month, and then I go in and select the book. So yeah, I agree with you. That way I can get some working out in, or I can go on a jog, or I can do whatever. And I can listen to a podcast, or I can listen to a book, or whatever, and get multiple things done. Listen, we could go on for quite a while here. I'm really enjoying it. Hey, what do you say we transition to the lightning round? Do you need to do anything to get ready for that transition? Do you need to stand up and do some jumping jacks?
Maybe a jumping jack or two, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm ready, man. Let's bring it.
Okay, cool. All right, so what book or program made an impact on you related to business that you'd recommend, and why?
It's a combination of The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, which I mentioned earlier, and a book called Business Model Generation by Alex Osterwalder and his partner, whose name I can never pronounce. Those two books got me thinking about business in a new way, got me thinking about faster iterations. It saved me, honestly, between the two of them, they probably saved me $100,000 in a year from software development that I would have done and didn't because of it. That was the right move. So great books, worth reading.
Lean Startup's one of my favorite books.
Nice.
It's easy to get caught up in creating this big, long, drawn-out program, when really all you need to do is just create the first 3 steps and make sure that the thing goes, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so what's one of your favorite books or pieces of technology that you've recently discovered, if any, that you'd recommend to other business owners, and why?
I have, again, it's a combination. I feel like I'm cheating, Travis, but these work in pairs. 2 tools for managing my email inbox. One is called SaneBox, S-A-N-E box, and the second is Boomerang. The combination of those 2 tools, it basically filters my incoming email, so I only see ones that are particularly important, and the rest I can look at in batches. And Boomerang allows me to schedule emails, so when I'm in Spain, as you said. Most of my business is North American based. When I start work, it's 3 a.m. in Toronto or New York, and that's not an ideal time to be sending sales emails. So I set it up to go out at 7:40 Eastern time. And those 2 combined with I've removed all email notifications from anywhere, so I don't see those anywhere, allows me to stay in the driver's seat in regards to email. And I think so many of us are slaves to email, or I was, that these have saved me literally countless hours a week.
Ah, cool. Yeah, I agree with you. What famous quote would best summarize your belief or attitude in business?
So this is hilarious to me. We are truly drinking from the same fire hose, Travis. I came on Skype and your Skype profile message was by Eleanor Roosevelt, and it was the quote that I had written down, which is simple minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, while great minds discuss ideas. So then I panicked because I thought, well, if you've shared it there, you've probably shared it before. So I went out and found another Roosevelt. No, okay, perfect. Well, we can stick with that, or I can give you my backup, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, give me your backup also. I'd like to hear it.
All right, so this is a few seconds long here, but this is by Teddy Roosevelt. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself on a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat.
Wow.
It gives you goosebumps, doesn't it? Honestly, every time I read that, I just get chills. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah. You notice, I'm sure you've probably noticed, and Gary Halbert wrote extensively on this, that the majority of negative people that say nasty, mean things are the ones that are sitting on the sidelines.
Absolutely. And we don't have time. I mean, when you're focused on achieving something that matters to you, there's just no time or patience for criticizing the work of others, right? And I think it's that whole idle hands of the devil's playground or whatever, right? Right. We need to stay busy doing something that matters, and that's how we stay more positive in life as well. Yeah,
I agree. Now, you've probably already heard this before, but I'm going to recommend it anyway. So, have you read Napoleon Hill's what's his book that he's
The Think and Grow Rich?
Yeah, have you read that?
I have, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I figured you had. The book, now I love that book and I've read it probably 5 or 6 times, but the one book that came out of his in 2011 that I absolutely loved, and it's incredible on audio, is Outwitting the Devil.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, Travis. I have a copy of it on my shelf along with several others, but I've heard great things.
Oh, you've got to listen to the audio. You said you like to listen to them via audio, right?
I do, yep.
The guy that plays the devil part is, he sounds like I would envision the devil to sound like. That's awesome. But the message in that book is so poignant and so powerful, and really kind of the inverse of what your quote was that you just read. And boy, when you get time, put that on your list of must-listen tos.
All right, it's moved up the list. I'll take it.
Cool. If you had to start over today, what would you do to get the fastest results? And fastest doesn't have to be tomorrow. It could be 2 years.
Great question. I think I would spend more time waiting for the breakout moment than trying to actively create the breakout moment. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I think I took any small taste of success and blew out a program and spent 10 times the money that I should have before really knowing that there was a market there. And so I think, there's this really interesting balancing act because we can't wait forever. We have to test things. But I think it's that idea of always be testing, but not, going full bore on things until you know that incremental growth is fine. I think that's the biggest thing. We read all these stories about, companies being sold for $16 billion or $1 billion here. I mean, billion seems to be the new magic number, right? And so we assume that, if companies can do that in 18 months, there must be something wrong with me if I've been at this for 5 years and I'm not $1 billion, valuation.
Right.
And so for me anyway, the trap was I got caught up in pursuing the next big win instead of appreciating the incremental and steady growth that leads to most successful and profitable businesses. So I would be a lot more aligned with analytics and metrics. I would be tracking the appropriate key performance indicators on a monthly basis, which we didn't start doing until about a year and a half ago. I would really set up more systems for listening and learning from the people that were in our community that were, supporters of what we did, and just be a little more deliberate. I think that would be the big one.
Boy, that's brilliant advice. That paid for the hour interview threefold, tenfold. If people could just re-listen to that advice, it could save you so much pain and heartache. And it's natural to want to hurry things up and press the gas as fast as possible, but you do need to make sure that you've got a winner. And the only way you know that is through testing. So completely agree with you. Well said. One last thing is, how do people connect with you, Chris?
Yeah, sure. So we're actionablebooks.com, exactly the way it sounds. And you can, find my contact info there. Or if you want to get a hold of me directly, you can email me, Chris, CHRIS, at actionablebooks.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Remember that you can find all the links to the books and the resources mentioned in this show in the show notes. Just go to rockstarentrepreneur.network.com and you'll find really all the resources that you're looking for there. Before I close the show today, I'd like for you to think about committing to two things. I talked about this on the last show, and I'm gonna repeat it several times because it's that important. It's something that I'm confident will help fast forward your success. So the first is I want you to find a mastermind where you can be surrounded by people that have an entrepreneurial mindset so that you can ultimately help eliminate those self-limiting negative thoughts and focus on constant forward, bold progress. No matter how successful you are, we still have those negative self-limiting thoughts that want to creep in. Try to find the absolute best group that you can get in, and rather than delaying it, get in any group first and then constantly seek to upgrade it until you feel like you've found a place that you fit in. Now, these people need to be outside your friends and family circle. Secondly, I want you to find a mentor that has already achieved what you dream of and see if that person will personally mentor you and your business so that you can quickly navigate your way to the next several levels of success while eliminating the guesswork. I wish I would have did this years and years ago. So just trust me and take a shortcut and find a mentor that fits that criteria. My quote for today comes from Zig Ziglar. And the quote reads, "You were born to win, but to be a winner, you must plan to win, prepare to win, and expect to win." This is Travis Lane Jenkins signing off for now. To your incredible success, my friend. Take care.